And I would also like to acknowledge that we have been made aware of a youth who passed away suddenly. And I would very much like to express my condolences to the family for your loss. This is truly very sad. And this individual had received a dose of vaccination more than a month before passing away.
More emphasis on more than a month.
There was nothing in the history or medical record to suggest an adverse reaction of significance or myocarditis.
Yeah, nothing to
despite
suggest.
What may be portrayed on social media.
Oh, yeah.
We are following with
listen to the ums.
Chief Coroner's Office in that investigation. It will take several weeks to complete the investigation.
I assure you, we will not find that what we're not looking for.
And there's nothing in the investigation to date to suggest that there was a causal association.
Nothing to suggest. Healthy kid.
That person having received immunization.
Dropping dead 33 days after a shot.
Unfortunate passing.
It's unfortunate for the greater good.
But if in fact we learned something different with regards to that, we certainly would communicate.
Yeah, we would, not we will.
But I think at this time, I would certainly like to reiterate my condolences to the family members. Such a sad thing to have a young person pass away suddenly like this. This is a rare event that does occasionally, rarely happen.
But you just finished saying there was no. You just finished saying there was no causal relationship. It's a rare event, but it does occasionally happen.
The investigations that are required to help determine exactly what happened are taking place.
Trust us, we're looking into it.
Would urge that people respect the need and the right of this family for their privacy.
You hear that, people? The government is ignoring it for their own privacy. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a beautiful Saturday here in Florida, hot, and other than the beautiful weather out there, there's going to be nothing fun. There's going to be nothing entertaining. There's going to be nothing uplifting about this. I don't think. I think there are certain situations in which it's impossible to find some sort of optimism or find salvation or find the brighter side. There are irreversible tragedies. There are irreversible wrongs that even justice, whatever that means, cannot right the wrong. And we're going to talk about one of those today. We've had on Stephanie DeGarry, Maddie DeGarry's mother. We had on Sean Hartman's dad. These situations where doctors are baffled. Everyone's baffled. It's like we can't find a cause because we're not looking for it. And you hear these try not to use inflammatory rhetoric. You hear these lying buffoons saying we can't we're baffled. We can't find any cause. It was more than a month ago that the individual had this shot. More than a month ago, so can't be related. Less than 2 weeks ago, so can't be related. And we now know. We now know the numbers are out there. 3 things cannot long be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. But the truth can be hidden for long enough that a lot of damage can be done until the truth is revealed. So today we have on Alan Martin and his wife, Taylor Martin. Sorry, I actually didn't know the name, and I see it now in the avatar. Their daughter, 18, passed away some 3.5 months after a Pfizer jab. And it may not be a story that you've heard of, Trista Martin. And there's probably a damn good reason why you've never heard of the story, because they're looking. They'll get back to you 6 months from now, a year from now. Media doesn't touch it, and I've been just doing a bit of a deep dive to see which media has covered this story. Alison Morrow, who you might know from Locals YouTube, covered it. There was another, I'm not saying obscure in any demeaning way, a non-legacy, non-mainstream media outlet. It's another story that has been subdued, suppressed, and utterly ignored by the media. And we're going to talk about it today. And it's going to hurt everybody's heart. There's nothing about it that doesn't hurt. And so you read tweets, and I came across this because I read a tweet that made my stomach hurt and made my heart hurt. And then I reached out to Alan, and he reached back, and we're going to do this. We're going to talk about it. So we're going to bring them on. We're not lasting long on YouTube for obvious reasons, although I probably will still post this in its entirety afterwards and take my chances with the YouTube suppressors. Suppressors and censorship, which I've said many times, is costing people's lives and has cost people their lives. Okay, so we're bringing on Alan and Taylor. Alan, Taylor, I see you. I'm going to bring you on. Why do I have a problem doing this? How's it going?
Good. Hi. How are you?
Good. It's nice to meet you. It's terrible circumstances under which we meet, and this is the world in which we live. What I'm going to do we're going to talk here for 5 minutes. You'll give just the brief overview of the family, like one general question, and then we're going to end this on YouTube, and we're going to go and delve into this in its entirety on Rumble. Who are you? Where are you guys from? What's your family story?
We're from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We've got hers, mine, and ours. We had 2 that were left in the house. The rest are adults and had moved on. The last 2 in the house were Trista and her little brother Noah. Trista was 18. Noah just turned 15 a couple of days ago. Trista had turned 18 in early 2022 and was excited to be an adult, excited for freedom and for traveling, and she was about to start college, and she loved concerts and music.
So you're from Oklahoma. Correct. And how many kids in total?
8. 8 total. Like I said, hers, mine, ours, and one that is really biologically neither of ours, but we chose ours. Yeah. So.
All right. And if I may ask, what do you guys do for a living, work-wise?
I work in IT and as much side job stuff as I can do. And she does
marketing,
social media management, marketing stuff.
All right, very cool. Now that's about all we're doing on YouTube, people. So I'm going to end on YouTube. The link to Rumble is over there, and we're gonna get into the story, get into this now. So ending on YouTube. All right, Alan, Taylor. So Oklahoma. I mean, the story. I say the story. The reason why you've become vocal on Twitter, which is how I found you, is your 18-year-old daughter Trista. And Taylor. Well, Taylor, I haven't seen you on Twitter. I've seen Alan's Twitter feed. Your 18-year-old daughter Trista passed away 3.5 months, give or take, after a Pfizer jab.
Correct.
And so, I mean, explain to the world how that happened. I'm going to have a lot more questions, but I mean, explain to the world how that happened, how your daughter took the jab. I mean, I know the story because I've been following it and saw the interview with Allison Morrow, but explain how this happened and what happened.
We didn't actually know that she had gotten the shot until she was in the hospital dying from it. She had kept that from us because she knew that we were a little weary of it. We'd asked all the kids not to get it, and we just didn't feel like there was enough information, no long-term data. We just said, let's hold off on this. You guys are everybody's young, and chances of you being injured by COVID are next to nothing. So let's just wait on this. And
statistically speaking, Trista had a 0% chance of having severe COVID and being hospitalized or severely injured or killed by COVID.
I know.
Absolutely no reason.
No, that's it. I'm from Canada. We had the case where in Alberta, it was Dina Hinshaw, the chief medical officer, who attributed the death of a 14-year-old teenager to COVID. Said it's our youngest death yet, and it turns out the kid had literally stage 4 brain cancer, was in a coma when they did a random test, and he tested positive and died shortly thereafter because he was in a coma from stage 4 brain cancer. And then the sister came out, said that's not what happened. They had to issue a retraction and apology. Yeah, I think in Canada, it was like 20 kids under 18 died, not of, but with, and they all had complicating factors where, statistically 0. So Trista's living at the house and she's getting ready to go off to college. And you had the discussion about you guys shouldn't, hold off and wait for it. What ultimately happened that led her to do it unbeknownst to you?
Well, we think after she passed, we talked with some of her friends and we kind of pieced together what happened over the course of the months before her passing. And she went to a concert in Texas, and she was not vaccinated. She didn't have the vax card, so they made her wear a mask. We think it was probably then that she decided that, mom and dad were silly, Everybody else, says it's safe. I know I have friends that have gotten it and they seem okay. She had mentioned that she was wondering if she was going to need it to go to college. She had said that she wanted to travel and that, it's going to be hard to travel without having that vax card. And so we believe that just the constant safe and effective narrative from the media and all the 3-letter agencies just kind of trumped mom and dad's opinion. And so she decided to get it, but either she didn't want us to worry, or I don't think she was worried that we were going to punish her or something for getting it.
Well, she want to disappoint us.
Yeah.
That's why she didn't tell us that she got it.
So she got it, and she told her friends not to tell us that she got it.
And what if I may ask, tangentially, but the concert in Texas where they were making the unvaxxed wear face masks, do you know what concert that was?
5 Seconds of Summer.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm also from Quebec, where they had vaccine passports for a while. So, you couldn't try out for after school soccer if you were 13 and over and not vaccinated, didn't have your little QR code. They had similar things like that in Texas. I would have thought, showing Texas.
It was up to the venue. I mean, it's all like a personal property kind of thing. So there was no, I don't believe that there was a municipal or even there wasn't a state mandate, but the venue could make the decision themselves. If they want to only allow people with vaccinated people or a negative a test, then they can.
Mask, yeah.
Yeah, they can make whatever choice they want. And so I think that venue at the time just decided that they wanted the either vaccine proof or you have to wear a mask.
And so she did this, but I mean, unbeknownst to you, let's say behind your back, but that sounds much more. She did it. I mean, 18 years old, adults, and yeah, I think in Canada they were saying 14 years old and over, you could do it without parental consent.
Yeah.
And so you don't know anything of this happens. Like what happens when what happens when she starts feeling sick and the day that this happens?
Well, of course we didn't know that she had it, but now that we look back, there were a few things that we realized were because of it. She was tired all the time. I mean, just wanted to sleep all the time. We just assumed she was working too much.
She got the shot as part of an annual checkup, and she got a different general practitioner that we don't normally go to. She told us before she went, she's like, "Hey, I'm 18 now, and we're really close friends with the GP that we normally have, and we've seen that GP for years. It's one of her best friends, and so she said, I'm an adult now, and I kind of want my own doctor." And so we were like, "Oh, okay, all right, if that's what you want to do." And so she decided she was going to make this appointment at a different GP that we had never gone to before, but she was going to get an annual checkup. And she told us about the checkup. She told us about the blood work, and she even came up. She was like, "All my blood work came back great. They said I got a clean bill of health. Everything's good, and we were like, that was it." She never mentioned that she got the shot. But like she said, there were signs, hindsight being 2020. Yeah. She was 18 and she was a really hard worker, more so I think than the average teenager. She'd had the same job for 2 years. And whenever somebody called in or whatever, she would always take fill-in shifts. She worked a lot. And so when she complained that she was starting to feel really tired, I would say, well, you probably because you're working too much and you need to take some time for yourself, maybe get some more sleep. So
that is one of the things, like it makes sense in hindsight, or what was suspicious but not remarkable at the time. So she goes in July to this new GP. Mm-hmm. The new GP, unbeknownst to you, gives her the shot. But I presume before any blood work has come back. Not that we might get into why that might be relevant later on.
Right.
Does blood work, gives her the shot,
Mm-hmm.
and then you now recall in retrospect between that's July and November, feeling constantly tired.
Like constantly tired. She would stand up and say, "Whoa, the room went dark for a minute," and make a joke out of it that she was, almost passing out from standing up. And again, we attributed that to her being tired because we had, she got the clean bill of health. She got the good blood results. And she would get, nauseous almost every time she ate. And we just didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah. And I have not, we'll get into, I guess, the correspondence you had with the new doctor after this event. And so this goes, so 3 months, although you don't notice this at the time. And then November comes around, and November, one day she wakes up feeling like death is I think what.
Yeah. No, November 9th, she had stayed the night at a friend's house, and she woke up early that morning and said she was having trouble breathing and that her whole body was hurting. And so she said, I'm going to go lay back down and see if I can feel better. And her sister, who was also staying there with her, she went to go check on her about 10 minutes later, and she couldn't get her to wake up. And then they called me, and I rushed over there, and she wasn't breathing by the time I got there. We had to start CPR and call 911 and everything. And the EMTs did get her back for a little while and got her in an ambulance and got her to the hospital. And at this time, I'm trying to reach him, and he's in the shower getting ready for work, and he finally answered.
Yeah, I answered the phone, saw that I had missed like 16 phone calls. And she says, Alan, it's Trista. It's serious. They're loading her in the ambulance. Get to St. Francis right now. And so I do. I throw on some clothes and I drive there as fast as I can. And then I park, and it's a large hospital complex in Tulsa. It's not, a small bodunk one. And I was a little concerned when I ran up. They didn't make me sign in. They asked me my name. There was a lady standing there in scrubs, and she just points at me and she says, "Are you Dad?" And I'm like, yeah. They call me that, and she says, "Follow me." And so she takes me back through some sets of double doors and into trauma. And there they all were working on her. And it was not, she was gone. Looking back on it, she was gone. It did not look, the beauty and the light and everything that made Trista was gone.
When she was at her friend's house and she had woken up feeling gravely ill, and then when you get the call, are people thinking drugs? I know that this came up afterwards, but like when something like this happens with a young person,
were not. Like her friends and her sister were not. They knew better. I mean, they had spent the whole night with her and everything, and they knew Trista and knew that she wouldn't do anything like that. They honestly, nobody knew what was going on.
I think the EMTs had said the word fentanyl a couple of times from what I was told. And so they immediately did toxicology, and all of that came back clean. So
and did they? Do you know? Like, I mean, did they administer Narcan when they were trying to do the?
I don't believe that they did.
We only have we only have partial records from the day in the ER, which I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute too. But we've only been given partial records for the day. But within those partial records, there's no mention of Narcan. There's no mention of anything.
So she's having trouble breathing and aches all over, tries to go sleep it off, and then becomes unresponsive. And then within what time frame is she declared? Is it hours, or is it an hour that she's basically legally declared dead?
No, that wasn't until 5:05 p.m. that evening.
But this happened early morning, like between 8 and 9.
They kept her alive with machines and everything.
And what I mean, I hate asking these questions, but I have to, in terms of like, what are they telling you? Are they saying heart attack? Are they saying poisoning? Like, what are they even telling you?
Yeah, they actually came to us. The main doctor in charge of her care came out to us at the very beginning and said, be straight with you guys. In situations like this, we give you about a 1% chance. And we were both just flabbergasted.
I said, in situations like what? What is this? What's happening? And he says, well, we know that her heart is swollen. She has multiple organ system failure. Everything's shutting down. We don't know why.
Yeah, she has a really high blood glucose level.
Yeah, her blood glucose level is over 600. She has lots of other factors in her blood. Right, he said that her blood right now is toxic to her, and that they needed to do dialysis. But if they did dialysis in her current state, that it would definitely kill her. So they needed to get her more stable so that they could do the dialysis. And that was all they knew.
For an ignorant person, dialysis is a blood transfusion, or
Well,
is it filtering?
They clean your blood and then put it back in. When your kidneys have shut down, your body can't process the toxins like, within your urine or sugars or anything like that. And in order to clean that blood out, basically it's like artificial kidneys and liver that clean your blood, and then they put it back in you.
And you use, when the doctor said, in situations like this, and your response was exactly my first reflex is what in situations like what? This is an 18-year-old girl, and they're telling you, did they tell you then, and like on the spot, an enlarged heart or swollen?
No, actually, right then they did not say enlarged heart. He talked about her organs shutting down. It was a little bit later that they brought in the cardiologist to do all the scans and everything, and that's when she told me that she had myocarditis.
And you mean a little later on in the day, right? Like this is
in the day, like just
okay. So this is like
an hour or so.
The day of. They are now saying this otherwise healthy young woman never had. I mean, I don't know what health issues she may have had, but never had anything. Has an. Did they say enlarged, swollen, or did they say myocarditis by terminology?
They said both of those.
It was repeated several times. I don't. They said her heart is swollen. That was told to me personally by doctors a couple of times. We heard them say to other doctors myocarditis.
She said myocarditis to me.
Yeah,
and then she explained to me what it was, even though I knew what it was. But
yeah. Okay, it's and now you're getting blood sample done the day of, which is in November, and you're going to have the blood sample that she did with that new GP from July to compare what's wildly different in 3.5 months in her blood work.
Right.
That's the goal.
And so they tell you myocarditis, we don't know why, and organs are failing, and we're going to do our best, but 1% given the stage.
Mm-hmm.
What do they tell you after? What do they tell you after? Like 5 or 5? How does this happen?
They did well. They actually got her stable for a little while, a little more stable, and moved her up to the ICU to start the dialysis, and that's when everything started going downhill. They didn't ever get to do that dialysis.
I remember because I think just hopeful. I wasn't. I mean, I knew that they were talking about myocarditis. They were talking about multiple system organ failure, and they were talking about all this other stuff and all of these words, and they were doing all these scans and all this other kind. But for some reason, I was fixated like on her brain. I knew that she had gone a while without breathing, and I knew that her heart had stopped, and they had restarted it. They managed to. Her heart stopped and was restarted several times, and so I asked one of the doctors. I said, have we? What's her brain gonna do? Is it how much brain damage have we even do we know yet? And he said, oh no, we're not even there yet. He said we're trying to fix her body to keep her body alive. He's like, so we're not even focusing on that at this point. So that was kind of when it went down for me, when I started to kind of realize this is bad. This is really bad.
And I know from the article that I read and prior interview that at some point during the day, one of her friends tells you that it says, by the way, she got the jab a few months ago. I want you just to flesh out that detail, but also I'm going to ask the obvious question. Did the doctors at any point ask for this information or?
No, never asked if she was vaccinated. When they got her slightly stable enough to move her from trauma up to the ICU where they planned on doing the dialysis, they had to pull her away from us and from out of the trauma. And they said, hey, if you guys want to go ahead and move upstairs, that's where we're taking her. It was right around that time that her friend told us, hey, I think that I should probably tell you that she got the shot a couple of months ago, and told us not to tell you guys. And we've discussed it. And initially right then, because we were living in that bubble of suppressed information, no data, no real data going on, we did not initially think, oh, this is what's doing it. This is what's responsible. I remember feeling like, okay, well, that's unfortunate. Surely that's not what is causing this. I mean, this is something else. This is this is something else. And that was my initial thought. And that didn't change until about 2 weeks after she had passed. And I could get where I think again and started researching.
But I'm asking this, like, the friend tells you this because in the friend's mind, it's relevant to the friend at the time, presumably because they know, or I mean, I guess
That's
they
the
tell
only
you
thing
this.
we can assume.
Yeah, I think she probably figured, we need all of the information.
Yeah.
This is really bad. We need to know everything. And she, I think, knew that was something that Trista had kept from us. So she needed to tell us.
Yeah. I can't speak for what exactly she was thinking when she told us this, but I mean, you could assume pretty easy.
Yeah, and this is like, it's not hindsight is always 2020. We're in November 2022 when a lot of the stats on some of these adverse events were, especially the myocarditis, and I presume maybe among the younger generation, especially if they're the ones living in that demographic that sees about it and hears about it, it might have been relevant in her mind, which is why she said it. Did either of you or her friend mention to the doctors at the time?
No, not at the time.
It's I presume you're familiar with the Sean Hartman story where
we are now.
And they the kid 33 days after the first shot, and they don't do basic tests that on blood work that you would do had you known or supposed it might have been an adverse reaction measuring. I'm not a doctor by any means, but troponin levels and all this stuff. So the doctors don't ask, and we don't know what's going on, but myocarditis, 18-year-old girl. And she passes away that day, and it's a couple weeks later that you start piecing this together.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had the same question. To the best of your knowledge, Trista had only had the one shot in July?
Yes.
Yes. That's the only one we found on her Vax card.
We've requested the records from the general practitioner that she went to that gave her the shot, and they are giving us the runaround is not adequate.
Understatement. Let me. If Trista got the shot to be fully vaccinated for all the social benefits, then presumably, there's a good reason to assume that she would have gotten the booster 2 months later. And this doctor, if you can imagine it, they're not giving you the information to confirm definitively that she was not given a second shot 2 months later. That's enough. That's enough to that's enough to make beyond rage. Is that's enough? So you don't know because this doctor has not confirmed definitively that she did not get a booster. So that's a question mark right now.
Correct.
And what have you done to ask for that information from this doctor? And don't name the doctor because I don't want anybody in the crowd.
No.
We've requested the records via certified letter. We know that they've received it because they, according to HIPAA law, as her parents, even though she was 18 years old, we are her immediate next of kin. So we're legally, we have a right. We have a right to these records, and a HIPAA law says that she has 30 days to deliver these records. Well, it's now been over 2 months, 2.5 months. She did call us. Her office called us to have me come up and sign some paperwork, some HIPAA paperwork. She said she needed. So I went up and signed the paperwork.
2 months ago.
Yeah, still nothing. I've called repeatedly. They give me another number to call. I call that number and it's just an answering service. You can't talk to a human. I've left numerous messages. I called the doctor's office again. We have now reached out to one of our congressmen and several other people to try and assist. And hopefully we're going to get that resolved here pretty soon. I don't think she can continue to put us off much longer.
No, not to sound beyond conspiratorial, my initial reaction is if you're giving one shot in July because you want to be compliant, the same doctor is going to give the booster within the window, depending on how short or open that window is. In this is in Oklahoma that this happened.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in Quebec at one point they were saying you can get the booster 4 weeks later if you. So you don't know. I'm suspicious and would think that the doctor did do this, and then the super cynical side says maybe they're trying to change some documentation now to make the adverse event, make the death not so close to a booster, and so the further it is away from the original, the more deniability they have. What kind of dog do you have, if I may? Change this up to something lighter.
He's a Priador. He's a Great Pyrenees Lab mix. He's a big boy out there.
No, that's I got two dogs. I love dogs. My followers know that I love dogs more than they're the best distraction on earth. So she passes away. Do you have I mean, what happens afterwards now? Because the toxicology reports are part of an autopsy, I presume, and not just standard blood work, or are there two types of toxicology reports?
I think there's multiple levels of toxicology, but when she was in the ER, they did blood work that is not immediately, but nearly immediately available, like within their own labs within the hospital, so that they can test for some of the most common, things like fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, whatever, things like that. And all of that came back clean. Obviously, she didn't do any of that stuff. But then they do, I guess, they're supposedly do a deeper level toxicology at autopsy. The medical examiner's office does, and which that's another one. It has now been almost 7 months since Trista's passed, and the medical examiner's office is also giving us the runaround. They will not release. Right now, her cause of death is under investigation, is what her death certificate says.
I have to ask like they're just impossible questions, but they do an autopsy. Do you do a private autopsy?
We plan to.
Yes.
Okay. Here's some other good news about the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office. They lost their accreditation back in 2009 and have not regained it since. In 2009, the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office got the lowest rating of all 50 states in the United States and lost their accreditation. They are crap. I mean, I don't know what else to say. They just absolute worse. And the doctor, there's two offices, one in Tulsa and one in Oklahoma City. Initially, within the first couple of months, trying to call and find out, is this done? Is this completed? Because we've learned that not only they're not accredited, but they don't have the equipment necessary to do the tests to determine that the inflammation was caused by anything. I mean, much less the vaccine. So they don't even have the equipment, the training, or the supplies necessary to do the tests that we need done. So we have reached out to private pathologists who are awaiting them to be completed with it so that they can release the blood and tissue samples to our private pathologists that will be able to determine, through examination, PEG tests, things like that, what actually the cause of the inflammation was, which basically is what we already know.
And they have the samples. Were you able to have a proper funeral?
We did, yes.
And now the samples that they take for subsequent testing, are those in their possession until such time as you can mandate your own private?
Yes.
What's the word I'm looking?
Yeah, there is a law apparently here in Oklahoma that they're supposed to hold on to it for 5 years. I guess
they're not allowed to dispose or destroy of those samples for 5 years after the date of acquisition, which the date of acquisition for her would have been, I guess, the 11th. And so from the 11th, the 5-year countdown starts. Now, of course, if they do, which, like what you had mentioned earlier, as far as your suspicions with the general practitioner that gave her the shot and the reason why she may be, I have those same feelings about the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office. I worry that they're going to lose or misplace the samples. I worry that they are trying to slow walk this for whatever, advantage that they can. But I mean, 7 months to finish an autopsy. Come on, this is a bit ridiculous.
Well, what's incredible is that when it's convenient, or at least when it's beneficial to whatever the interests are, it'll take 7 months. When it's convenient for whatever the interests are, it'll take 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you need me to plant cynical thoughts. I mean, you can't trust the system. The longer it goes on, the longer the time is to not trust a system that can't be trusted. Right. Was there any option, or is there any potential remedy? Have you sought an attorney in all of this yet?
We can't really afford that right now. We do have a we do have a Give Send Go setup that can help, but her memorial, her headstone, the plot, all that stuff is like $23,000. We've been paying a lot towards that. There's a lot of the private pathology is going to be very expensive. And from my particular standpoint is before I go trying to invest a bunch of money in a lawyer that may or may not even help us, I want to be able to get all of the facts, the information, do as much of it as I can myself, get the records from everybody. If I can have congressmen help me, which Congressman Josh Brasheen here in Oklahoma, he's super helpful, super supportive. There's another gentleman who is an advocate for us. His name is David Oldham. He's helping us a lot. So we do have people that are helping us and doing it of their own, free will that aren't really paying yet. Of course, because of the emergency use authorization, we can't sue Pfizer, even when it's determined medically and legally that the shot did this. Too bad that sorry about your luck.
Which is the reason why it's hard to get an attorney to
Right.
take something like this on.
Right.
A lot of cases like this in the past, they would have done, on a contingency, but now they know it's going to cost a fortune, and
Right.
they're
And
up
so
against the government.
Right now, if we were going to sue someone, the only people that we could sue would be, well, we could sue the medical examiner's office, but that would just, probably take longer than if they just went ahead and did their job and released it beforehand. We could sue the general practitioner that gave her the shot, but initially, I didn't really hold a lot of malice or ill will or any kind of anger toward the GP that gave her the shot initially, because I know that she was lied to just like everybody else was. Everybody else was told fake data, fake information. You've had Stephanie DeGarry on. You know how much fraud has been done by Pfizer.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to make you more cynical at all. I would say, initially I'd give the benefit of the doubt, but we're November, or you're July 2022.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
The doctors knew. I mean, they were saying the quiet part out loud by that time, and then you get this doctor who the hell knows what benefits they're being given to
Right.
jab as
Right.
many people.
And now we're hearing stories like if they have 70% of their patient base is vaccinated, then they get like a $250,000 bonus. And not to mention the like $50 to $100 that they get from Pfizer per shot as an incentive for giving it. If they maintain a level of 70% of their base, their patient base is vaccinated, then they get huge incentives.
Now, I don't know that, and not to challenge you. The only question is, that's news to me. How did you come across that?
I just actually read about that just a couple of days ago, and I'll have to find it and I'll send it to you on Twitter.
Oh yeah, no, I'll look. I'm going to try to look for.
Okay, well you can look it up, but yeah, they get huge incentives if they maintain a minimum of 70%. So like if you come in with a stub toe, they have an incentive to get you to get the vaccine because that's going to put their overall vaccine compliancy rate higher, and
there's so
they'll
many,
get a big bonus.
There's so many, even double sinister reasons for which that might be the case. Is vaccinate everybody, and then from Pfizer's perspective, adverse reactions become even more difficult to quantify and measure.
Right.
And now you might have reluctance from the GP to give you the information about a potential booster for other reasons. Now, you had mentioned in prior interviews, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about, bad batches.
Yes.
What did you discover about the batch of at least the first jab that Trista had taken?
What we know now is that it is something along the lines of 3% of the batches released by Pfizer are responsible for over 70% of all of the severe adverse reactions. The batches that are known to be the most dangerous, the ones with the highest numbers, begin with EN and F. Hers was FN2908. So we know that the batch that she got is one of the ones that is basically known to kill. We know that that particular batch has killed at least 9 other people, and that's just by VAERS data. So,
and that is to say that you can inversely correlate death as a reported adverse reaction on VAERS to the batch number.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And now the question is, again, like, are GPs supposed to know this? One might presume that there had been enough discussion about bad batches at this time. We're even situating it in July 2022, and then subsequent potential booster coming from, I don't know how that batch would, I don't even know how that would work. How long would a batch last in the refrigerator or at the GP's office?
I don't know, but I know back in December, VAERS will tell you if you go to howbadismybatch.com, you can look up the batch. You can get all this kinds of information. It pulls all this information, and it tells you whether or not that batch is still active, if it's still being actively given to patients. And back in December, it was still inactive. As of right now, I don't believe it is anymore. But we called the general practitioner's office, and I called them after I got all this information, and after the UK study, after meeting Dan Hartman, or speaking with him, talking with Stephanie DeGarre, Caitlin Goetze's mother, and learning all this information, I called the general practitioner's office, and I talked with the receptionist, and I said, hey, you had a patient. Her name was Trista Martin. She was 18 years old. She had an annual in which she got a clean bill of health, and during that annual physical, you gave her a Pfizer shot, batch FN2908, and she passed away 112 days later. I really believe that you should reevaluate continuing to give out not only the shot as a whole, but this particular batch. And the receptionist said, okay, thank you, and hung up the phone. That's it. No, I'm sorry for your loss. No, my condolences. No.
No, I'll pass that information.
I'll pass that information.
No,
Yeah, nothing.
we'll talk to the doctors. Nothing.
May I ask, did you happen to record that conversation by any chance?
No, of course I didn't. Of course I didn't.
Yeah.
And that's not to say not to doubt it whatsoever, just so that nobody.
But I think that they have recording, because I'm pretty sure it says that when you call that. So I mean, we could request that call. So
yeah. that's I mean, it's obscene. It's obscene, but there's no but. It's obscene. So Trista passes away in November. 2 weeks later, once you're over the initial absolute shock of the grief, you start putting things together. Explain the path or the journey of your quest for information, how it works, what you do, and where it ultimately leads. Like, say we're now 6 months later.
So I go to work, back to work. I think it's for one of the first days back at work, and I just, obviously I can't stop thinking about it, and I've got all of these things going in my head, everything that doctors were saying, and so I just go to Google and I type in myocarditis, high blood glucose, non-diabetic 18-year-old female death, and one of the first results that pops up is a study on NIH.gov that specifically the conclusion of the study was that it was well known that people who received the mRNA vaccine had elevated blood glucose levels for an extended period of time, depending on, even in non-diabetic patients. It caused your blood glucose level to be elevated. So they recommended, by the end of the study, they said that they recommend closely monitoring blood glucose levels for anyone who got the mRNA vaccine.
Every single person.
And I remember thinking, they were giving this out at CVS. They were giving this out in drive-thrus. They were giving this out in malls. How the hell were they closely monitoring blood glucose levels of anyone they gave this to? So they knew this, and they still weren't following even their own basic recommendations from their own government website. So that was the first thing that really pissed me off. And then I spent hours looking through other stuff: myocarditis, multiple organ system failure, all the known adverse reactions that had been associated with the mRNA shot. The UK study that came out, it was an Israeli study that talked about how the peak rate or the peak death was at 4 months. And all these people say, oh, it was 112 days later. It couldn't possibly have been the vaccine. Well, then why is the Israeli study showing peak death at 4 months? And then they said that it stayed in the arm, but now they found it in organ tissue samples all over the body. So it doesn't stay in the arm. We learned about so much information. It was just over and over and over, everything. All roads led back to that, despite the fact that she was perfectly healthy before. And the only abnormal, out of the ordinary thing was that. And a lot of people say, well, even the trolls online, who are absolutely ridiculously stupid and vicious,
Horrible people.
they go, well, you said yourself that she had COVID. She had already tested positive for COVID. I'm like, yeah, 1.5 years before. And for her, it was a bothersome cough. I had COVID at the same time, and it was not fun. I lost the taste. I lost the smell. I was sick in bed for like 5 days.
Which is actually the only reason why we tested her.
Yeah, so we
Because
tested
she was
everybody,
sick, yeah.
and she tested positive, and she just had a little bit of a cough, and she was over it, and that was it. She never lost her taste, never lost her smell, and it was 1.5 years before. But for those smooth brain morons, it's more likely that for them that COVID is actually what killed her, not the shot that she had 112 days before that, possibly sooner if she got the booster.
It's there's no reasoning with it because it's it's what's known as motivated reasoning or
Right.
not cognitive bias, but it's not even confirmation bias. It's stupidity because to attribute it, say, oh, it happened from something that happened 1.5 years earlier, because that's more likely, or at least that's even possible. But it's absurd to say something that happened 100 some odd days earlier when we know. And what you're describing is the knowledge that you're gaining after this tragedy. In retrospect, and it's only for having been immersed in this from the beginning, is like I remember Malone in the early days saying it creates a spike protein that doesn't stay in the injection sites. I remember that from early on, not even understanding what that meant. And then I remember also, I forget, it was well into the what do they call it? Not the release, but when the campaign to vaccinate, that they were talking about aspiration of the needle. And if you don't aspirate and it goes into a vein, then it can go everywhere immediately. And then I had some doctors on explaining, not only were they not aspirating, but they were told not to aspirate the CDC because that might cause more vaccine hesitancy the longer the needle stays in. Myocarditis, we started hearing about it, I mean, at the very least, 1 year into the, what is it called? Rollout of the vaccine.
The rollout, yeah.
And then there was a study that just came out recently that said the adverse events of special interest were 1 in 800 between the mRNA of Pfizer and Moderna. And so now you're learning about this after the tragedy of tragedies, looking for answers. And
we've even spoken with several doctors. One of them in particular, you might know, Dr. Mackus. He's also from Canada. But he even was able to explain to us why she died at the time that she died. He said that the early morning thing, like if you know Sean Hartman's story, his mother found him beside his bed 33 days after the shot, dead on the floor. The problem, I guess, with the inflammation within your cardiopulmonary system and all over your body, when you're sleeping, in order to wake you up after the sleep cycle is complete, your body releases just a little bit of adrenaline, and that's what kicks you out of being asleep and into the wake. And that's why so many of them are either dying in their sleep or right before they wake up or during physical exertion. So one of those two things. One of the studies that originally came about the myocarditis, they said that it was more prevalent in young men. Young men were more likely to have the myocarditis caused by the vaccine, and that they were the ones seeing the death. That's since been flipped on its head too, that's not necessarily true. The reason I think, I read this particular paper that was talking about the only reason that showed that is because young boys are more likely to be involved in aggressive and very
physical exertion
sports.
Yeah.
So the girls are still dying and still have the inflammation. They still have the myocarditis, but they're dying in their sleep, and unless they're cheerleaders or do some kind of active sport.
That's an interesting observation that I had. We had heard that it's more likely in young men. That's what our Canadian doctor there, what's his face, Kieran Moore out of Ontario, was confirming. Despite they say it, and then all the media and all the other doctors come around and say, no, that's not what he meant. It's not 1 in 5,000.
Right.
But that's interesting why it would be more noticeable in young boys than girls for that reason. Right. And so you're getting stonewalled by the doctors. Someone on Rumble, incidentally, says, let me just get this. Jay Pearson says, you have to report the doctor to the HHS Office of Civil Rights for not providing records, HIPAA. That's not legal advice. That's not any advice. That's a comment. You're getting stonewalled by the GP. No real meaningful progress from the hospital or whoever's conducting the autopsy analysis.
Correct.
Do you have any news from them at the current date?
No. We have partial records from the day that she passed from the hospital, but we still don't have any of the digital records. We don't have any of the scans. We don't have any of the electronic work, like from none of the CAT scans, MRIs, EKGs, sonograms, none of that stuff. And they did all of that, but they haven't released any of that data to us. They've just given us
that she had it.
Yeah, that
they
it was
tests.
given, and then the notes that the doctors wrote in, and then it's all just doctor gobbledygook.
What was the number of the batch again?
FN 2908.
With the aggregate knowledge of the internet, break that down as well. Now, the other question is this: have you gone to the media, or has the media come to you?
They won't touch it.
Yeah, we have reached out. The only way that we know how, a lot of ways on Twitter. We've reached out to. I've called all of our local networks, even the conservative ones, and they don't respond. Emailed. I have tagged everybody I know to tag on Twitter. I've tried sending direct messages if they allow it.
We've even, we've met people in person, and they've said, "Oh yeah, I'll give you a call," and there's no.
Yeah, and then they never do. We've reached out to even some politicians here locally in the area. Met them in person even. They say they're going to give us a call, and then they don't. Except for Congressman Josh Breachin's office. His is the only office that has actually returned our phone call. And I spoke with his chief of staff, John Jones, who's an amazing individual. And I spoke with his the head of his new COVID accountability task force, which is a guy named Sean Andrews, and spoke with him at length. And they seem genuinely like they're going to help. And so that is the most uplifting information I've had, and that's just occurred here within this last week. So.
It's shocking. I mean, it's shocking, and it's the same thing in Canada for Sean Hartman. It's the media. I've always said, like, the media will ignore it, then they'll distort it, then they'll defame. So you're still at step one where they're going to ignore it until they can't, and then it becomes the obligation of everyone else out there to make this a sufficient stink that they can't ignore it. But then. Wait until they get into step two of I don't know, demonizing and trying to, whatever. And so, I mean, what are your plans now? So you're still waiting on the information from the hospital. You have your own private pathologist ready to analyze this once you get the samples or whatever they have stored.
Correct.
And
as soon as we have access to, as soon as they release them, then at that point, the doctors that are doing the private pathology can request those and then get them. And of course, I've had all kinds of horrible thoughts and nightmares in my mind that you have to cross. You can't worry. You got to cross a bridge when you get there. But I do want them to do DNA samples on the tissue samples before they actually do the tests, because I don't have any confidence in the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office that even the tissue samples and blood samples that they send will be Trista's. But that could just be me being a narcissist or not an optimist.
Well, no, I mean, it's one thing we've learned. There's no bottom to the depravity of this. There's no bottom to the. I call it evil. There's no other word right now. There's no bottom to what they'll do to conceal what they've done.
Yeah.
In this process now, you've met with other vaccine injured, vaccine related, vaccine attributed deaths. Who you've met? You've met the Hartmans, the Garys.
Yes, met the Garys. We spoke with Ernest Ramirez, his son Ernesto, which actually his son, I believe it was 5 days after the vaccine. His son and the death certificate, his death certificate even says myocarditis and inflammation induced by vaccination. So his death certificate actually pins Pfizer as the cause of his death. He's actually come out and said that FEMA, of all organizations, FEMA called him up and requested that he allow them to re-examine the autopsy and cause of death to reevaluate and change the cause of death. They wanted him to take that off of his death certificate, and they were going to pay him money to do it. And of course, he told them to go,
Yep.
into themselves. But I mean, that's how evil these people are.
What does it say? I mean, you have a death certificate for Trista?
Yes, it just
Cause
says
of death unknown.
Yeah.
It's just a temporary one until the final
one comes, and right now it just says under investigation.
And among all the people now, the parents who are victims to this, is there a coalition? Are you guys doing anything to I mean, I know what you're doing to raise awareness. Are there other things that people should know are going on right now from those who are vaccine injured?
Yes.
There's actually an event that they're holding in Florida, August 5th, that we are all, I don't know how many of the rest of them, but I know we were going to be there. I know Ernest is going to be there.
Mhm.
A lot of doctors and nurses and injured, and everyone's going.
There's an organization. There's an organization called React19, react19.org. There is, of course, Steve Kirsch's organization, VERS, I can't, vaccine, Steve Kirsch's organization.
Yes.
Yep.
Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, VSRF, yeah. Then there is Real Not Rare, realnotrare.com is a place where people can go and learn about the individual stories.
And you can go share your story.
You can go share your vaccine injury or death story. There are thousands.
So many.
And now, I was going to say they have this thing in Canada. Well, they have is it called the Vaccine Injury Support Program? I think it's called the VISP in Canada, and I'm starting to call it the Vaccine Insult to Injury Support Program.
Exactly.
What do they have in Oklahoma? What do they have in the States? And what have you done to try to avail yourselves of whatever compensation?
There is an American Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. I think here it's VICP, and they have paid out to 3 people a total of, I think it was $4,500 grand total of what they've paid out to 3 vaccine injured people. And it's a joke. It's an absolute insult. And that's it.
Well, and it's like, that's the thing where they're going to say, look, we haven't even had that many applications, as though anybody who's suffered the loss that you've suffered is interested in that, as compensation. It's dehumanizing rhetoric for what's happened. Yeah. You filed a VAERS report, I presume.
Yes.
And what would be to explain to everybody who thinks anybody can go and say they turned into the Hulk from a vaccine, which
they actually do research what you tell them. I mean, they go and fact check it. They check to see if she really existed. They check to see if she passed, if we told the correct information if she had the vaccine.
It was over a month-long process. They verified her batch number, they verified her appointment, they verified the date, they verified her passing, they verified everything. We had to put all of that information in, and it was not.
It took a couple months for it to appear on.
And then we finally got the notification that said, okay, it's everything's been verified and your information's good to go. There is some crazy stuff on VAERS.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I bring the example up because it is crazy stuff, and people don't seem to understand that person who reported turning into the Hulk, or that was their symptoms.
Yeah,
it was over a decade old. I mean, that's the best example they can get of one that slipped through, and then people don't know. They don't check dates. Like, oh, that must be COVID related, when it's not. It was one what's the word? Anomaly.
Yes.
Now let me ask you: Are you religious? Are you religious folks? I mean, I don't know if you and have been before this as well.
Yes.
How are you dealing with this?
So, gonna get a little personal for a second. We used to be very heavily involved in our local church, and we volunteered. We took the kids. Up to the time,
just a volunteer.
Yeah, up to the time she was about 16 years old. She would work in the young kids, the toddlers and stuff like that, and they loved her. She was Miss Trista, and she always loved kids, and so she really enjoyed doing that. But then, a couple of years ago, we just kind of drifted away a little bit, and we didn't like the some of what was coming from the pulpit. So we decided we were going to start looking for another church, and looking for another church kind of turned into just not going. And so we did drift away from God quite a bit. And then this happened. And all of a sudden, I felt I was being attacked mentally, and just thoughts that I was having. I was having some of the worst thoughts about my daughter's soul and where it might be. And it was all my fault because I didn't keep her close, you know. So my best friend is also one of my spiritual advisors. He is a very devout, you know, God-fearing man. And he says, well, you know, because he was one of the only ones that I told about it when I was having that problem. He says, well, I can tell you this. No matter how much you loved Trista, you know, God loves her 1,000,000 times more than you do. He said, and I was there, you know, and I saw her, you know, give her life, you know, to the Lord. And he's like, so you need to stop worrying about that. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, easier said than done, you know. And so he made a couple of jokes, and then it was cold. This was November. And we were I was pacing around in the backyard, and he made a joke about my garden hose still being attached to the spigot outside, and that it was going to cause the pipes to burst, and that I needed to go get that off. And so I walk over there, and in the freezing cold, there's this one little purple flower that is poking straight off the top of the garden hose.
It's wrapped around the spigot.
Yeah, and there's no other flowers anywhere else. Everything else is dead. It's all brown, except for this one little patch, and there's just one little purple flower. And of course, her favorite color was purple. And as soon as I saw it, I smelled her, very similar to like the post that I made, you know, the other night. I smelled her, and I got like this warm peace, and I knew that she was okay. And that put that to rest. I didn't have to worry about that anymore. So I know that she is in heaven. It doesn't help. It doesn't help how much I miss her here.
Yeah.
I was going to ask something. Do you see I don't know, a therapist, a grief counselor? How do you on a day-to-day? How do you go through? I mean, I don't think there's a way to recover. It's just time. What do you do on a daily basis to help?
Trista was a fighter. She was a really hard worker. She was a great listener. She was extraordinarily funny. She had the best sense of humor. She loved harder than anybody that we knew. And she loved kids. We found her bucket list under her bed that she had made when she was 16 years old. And she'd been keeping track of it for a couple of years. And after she passed, we found it. It's got 66 things on here that she wanted to accomplish. And, you know, like one of them was she wanted to turn 18 so that she could donate blood. She wanted to adopt a teenager because, you know, the teenagers get overlooked. She wanted to be a child psychologist, and she wanted to, you know, help kids. And I know that when she got this shot, she did not want to die. And I know that if she knew that they were pushing this shot on 6 months and older babies, she would be so pissed at me if I just sat back and let this happen. So, in an effort to not make her mad at me, and for her death to not be in vain, I have to fight. I've got to tell this story over and over and over until they stop. Until they stop killing kids. That's how I get through.
Are you back at work now as well? You're working full time?
Yes. Yeah, I work full time. 50 hours a week, plus doing as many side jobs as I can. And people have been great. I mean, the Give Send Go thing has really helped. We've been able to get a lot accomplished, and we hope to be able to pay off her plot and her headstone, because they won't start it until it's paid in full, which I get. I mean, if you don't pay the bill on a headstone, what are they going to do? Repossess it? You know what I mean? So they won't make it until it's paid in full, and we had no idea how expensive that stuff was.
Well, the Give Send Go, we're going to blast around on various communities, and that's the least of it. I mean, that's the least of it. And if I may ask, also it's a very personal question. I mean, your other kids, the other members of the family, how are they coping with this? How are they dealing with it?
It's some shove it down a little more than others, but for our youngest and for her sister Maya, they were more than sisters. They were best friends. She was her person. It's really hard for her.
Maya is her older sister. She's probably, I think, taking it the worst. Like she said, they were best friends. Trista loved. Trista listened. Trista was who you went to.
Trista gave her guidance, even though she was the younger sister.
She was younger. She was smarter. She was more mature. She was who would put you in the right direction. Like I said, she was a hard worker. She was the best of us without any of the bad stuff. It was. I know everybody says their kid is like, oh, my kid's, but she really was. And the world is a worse place now.
Are there among the grieving families, the Hartmans, Ramirez, you guys, is there not a help? I want to say a help group, for lack of a better word. Are there resources among all of you that you share in order to help you through the grieving process?
Not just Twitter. We talk in direct message on Twitter a lot. Share information amongst ourselves, what's going on. Give each other encouragement that way. We do talk occasionally.
Have Twitter spaces for vax injured and bereaved, and we all get to share and talk in those.
They always do those stupid Twitter spaces at like 2:00 in the afternoon when I'm at work, and I don't really have an opportunity. So, but other than that, but yes, they do. We do have. There's nothing, I think, officially set up, but there are lots of ways that we reach out and speak with each other.
And now people are asking what they can do to help. I'm going to share the obviously the Give Send Go. I'm going to go see if there's any questions here that I didn't get to but let's see. Number one, how can people help? I mean, I guess it's going to be share and bother some, but I don't know what the issue is, that the media is going to ignore it for so long until it's no longer uncommon, and then it becomes something not of interest to report on because of its frequency. Have you? Sorry, go. Yeah, please.
No, I think I think the key here is the narrative, and in order to change the narrative, and politicians are politicians, and the only change that can be done in order to get the shot pulled, in order to stop doing this, in order to get it off of the child vaccine schedule that they're trying to get it put on, order to stop all this horrible crap from happening, we have to get politicians involved. The problem is that politicians are scared of flows that don't go the same direction all the time. And so right now, the CDC message of safe and effective, the FDA, all these safe and effective messages, if you come out and act like, and like Robert Kennedy Jr., if you come out like him, you're called a whack job in the media, you're defamed, you're demoralized, you're shamed. So Ron Johnson, Robert Kennedy, those guys that are actually speaking out are vilified. So if we can share it and make it so insurmountably obvious that these politicians have no choice. They have no choice but to acknowledge it. They have no choice but to jump on the wagon. And they'll feel safer doing it because there'll be other politicians doing it.
I see that the people are already going that direction.
Yeah, but right now, as a politician, it's pathetic, it's spineless, yeah, but it's what they do. So you just kind of have to freaking live with it. But if they would stop being so damn spineless and take a stand like the people that elected them to do, then but we've got to get that. So the only way to do that is to share the story, to share Ernesto's story, Dan's story, our story, Maddie DeGarry's story, specifically Maddie DeGarry's.
Yeah, it was for people who, everybody watching now knows it, but like that's the most shocking one because that was in the trials when they wrote off one out of, and even if it was one out of, I think there was what were there 1,000 kids, maybe 1,200 at most. Even if it's 1 in 1,000, they wrote it off. They
upset stomach. That's it.
Yeah, well, no, there was another even more not nefarious, but a more insulting word.
The neuro, but it was basically all in her head. So
it was the medical term for tummy ache to write off Maddie DeGarry's. And that was trials where that's where it should have ended, and not only that, the experimentation continued onto the humans. Obama said it eloquently, and now that it's getting to the point where we even have Justin Trudeau in Canada saying, "Yeah, sure, I'm sure a lot of people got injured from the vaccine, but it's what we had to do," and it's like it's all. Now I'm going to read someone someone from Rumble bought in lesson. I can't read the rest. It says good for everyone that they get the opportunity to share. And I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard of your story until your tweet came across my feed. I want to. There's a comment here which says from someone in our community, Mighty Piss, says Viva, let them know so many of us care and are praying and want to help. I don't think people can't understand it who haven't gone through it. And some, you might be able to empathize. It's inhumane. And the insult to the injury is that you get ignored. And I'm sure you get called names on the internet one way or the other.
People could not even imagine the things that people say.
Yeah. You think you might have an idea? You don't know.
Yeah.
And I'll ask the obvious question. I don't think it's easy to tune it out. How do you deal with? You seem like you're dealing with this insurmountable tragedy. I don't know if spirituality helps. But how do you deal with the evil that you see coming from heartless shitheads? I'm sorry for lack of a better word. Who see a weakness and see a vulnerable individual, and then stick a knife and twist.
Sometimes it's easier than other times.
I get in trouble.
Alan,
that's what
I have to remind him just to let that go. And I try and tell him, you know what, these people that are commenting on our stuff, they're saying awful things. They're helping it be seen. They're helping it be seen too. That's... So you have to try to ignore that. And so many amazing people actually come to your defense that you really don't have to say anything. They take care of them for you, the other people out there on Twitter. You just really have to try and.
No, it's like the idea of like just not ignoring it is it's impossible, and something always sneaks in regardless.
Yeah, we all have our moments.
Yeah, the vast majority of them, if you look at them, it's an account that is relatively new. They've got like 1 follower, and they're just a troll. That's just the point of it is for them just to have this account to troll. So every time you respond, it actually
Helping
increases their
yeah.
algorithm. So you're responding to their ridiculousness, and then that just makes more people see it. So it's hard to keep that in mind, though, when they say such stupid, horrific crap.
It's like there's a joy in saying the worst thing conceivable, even if it's totally outlandish. So someone asked a question, Isaac David Waxman, and then answered it. But he says, first, this is from our community and locals. It says, we need to help get her the memorial she deserves, a place for everyone who loved her to come and sit and visit her memory. We are currently under contract with Floral Haven Cemetery in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, for a small plot and pink granite bird bath inscribed with her name and picture. This is from your GoFundMe, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna that's gonna, there are some gestures that will show the goodness of humanity. I'm going to blast that around as much as humanly possible.
Thank you.
Have I forgotten to ask any question, or is there anything you wanted to say that I forgot to ask?
There is one new website that has been out now for a couple of weeks. And that if anybody is looking for information specifically to put these stupid trolls in their spot, when they say ridiculously stupid things. It's a very short, very easy website. It's just covid.crosstx.com.
Cross TX, like cross Texas or cross?
Right.
Okay.
Like cross TX. covid.crosstx.com. It's actually a website that was made by react19.org that has 3,400 peer-reviewed studies. A collection of all of these studies that showed the adverse reactions by this mRNA shot, verifiable proof. There it is. 3,400 peer-reviewed case reports and studies. Just everything you could think to look at. Here is the evidence.
Yeah.
Here is the evidence that they constantly say does not exist. It does exist. It is out there. It is peer-reviewed, and it is known.
It is the three things cannot long be hidden, but some take more time to be exposed than others. And I know this from having watched Alison Morrow's interview with you. You're in Trista's room.
We are.
And you're well. Let me ask. You're leaving it as is, and
yeah.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, how do you not?
Yeah. There's no need to change anything. We come in here. We don't have, maybe when her memorial is done,
we might place to go visit. We have her ashes in here. We have it still smells like her. So.
And is there a plan to try to do her bucket list?
Yes, we've already started on some of that. She wanted to see the Aurora Borealis. One of her sisters recently went to Iceland, and she took her with her and saw it, and she wanted to ride in a helicopter. My mother recently went on a helicopter ride and took some of her ashes with her, and so she wanted to go to a lantern festival. We actually had one for her on her birthday, March 25th. It was beautiful, amazing.
It was her birthday. She would have turned 19 years old. There's a video of it. I think it's on John's website. Yeah. So I think it's on Broken Truth.
Hold on, let me see
of it.
Let me see. I think it might. I saw it, and I think it might have been on Rumble.
It was actually a really wonderful evening.
Yeah, it was beautiful. For those that don't know, it's a Chinese lanterns. The kind that's just like I got a candle in them, and they're made of like rice paper, and then you let off a few hundred of them, and it's amazing. I totally understand why she wanted to go see this.
Let's if there's a way to, let me just bring this up. This with can I play the video?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'll play this video. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything and nobody has any questions that I forgot to ask. I'm going to say I can't. It's not a question of thanking you. Your story, I can't imagine the grief that it goes through every time you have to repeat it, every time you have to think about it. I don't know how parents get over this, and I don't think anybody ever does. And I don't know how you live with it without it without it destroying you. And that is, I mean, that's I don't know. That's something for you. I mean, I don't know how you're going to live with that. And I don't, or what
We
you do
turned
with
it
that.
into something. We
Yeah.
turned it into a reason,
Yeah.
I think,
A
to
fight.
fight. And I think that's how we're gonna.
All right, we're gonna. I know. So May and it's it. People need to, it's not just people need to hear your story. You need to tell your story, and people need to do something about it, because it's not. Okay, now let me. I'm going to bring this up here. This is it. We'll play this after this. We'll end the stream, and we'll say our proper goodbyes afterwards. But this is the I think this is the Trista Memorial here celebration.
Trista was 18 years old. She was fun, vibrant, beautiful.
She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to adopt a teenager. She said that everyone always overlooks the teenagers for the babies, and she said that they needed parents too. She wanted to be a social worker and a child psychologist. And she just wanted to help people.
She was supposed to start college in the spring. I don't understand why. She was so good.
Sweet little butterfly, please never go. Sweet little butterfly, I want you to know everything you touch and every place you fly will flourish and prosper. Please don't say goodbye. I wonder if you leave, what will I do? It's a sad thought, but I already knew. Life will darken and light would stop if I climbing the mountain and never reaching the top. Sweet little butterfly who took you away, they must not have known I needed you to stay. I cry and I plead, but I already know wherever you are now, they won't let you go. I can't be selfish, you weren't mine to keep. In the arms of our Father is where you now sleep. I know you're okay, and I know you're alright, but I'm scared of the dark, and you are my light. Sweet little butterfly, I know that someday I'll see you again and you'll ask me to stay. I hope that you fly me around and let me see the new world you brought your light to, that's where I should be. Sweet little butterfly, you've grown into something pure, bright. You're an angel now, and we're still living in your light.
Thank you guys again for coming. Happy birthday, Trista. We love you.
All right. Alan and Taylor, thank you for coming on to talk about this. And I don't know, in as much as there can be healing, the world is supporting you. So that is it. I'll put the links so everybody knows where to find you, how to support you. Everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. And Alan, Taylor, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes.
Thank you for having us.